Rain lashed against the dining room windows, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. September 15th, my 72nd birthday, and for the third year in a row, I was utterly, devastatingly alone. The antique clock on the mantelpiece chimed 7, a mocking reminder of the dinner reservations I'd made, the cake I'd baked, the hopeful smile I'd plastered on my face, all for nothing. My phone sat silent, a cold, unblinking rectangle on the polished mahogany table. Perhaps they're just running late, I murmured to myself, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. I'd heard that excuse 2 years ago, the year Michael claimed a sudden urgent business trip. Last year, Jennifer had blamed a gallery opening, a whirlwind of artistic inspiration she couldn't possibly interrupt. And Sarah, my sweet Sarah, always so thoughtful, had promised a special celebration, a family lunch she'd planned herself. "We'll make it up to you, Mom," she'd said, her voice full of apologetic warmth. But the lunch never happened. Instead, a hurried text arrived, crammed with apologies about Julian's sudden illness. I picked up my phone, the cool glass a stark contrast to the burning in my throat. No new messages, not even a text. I stared at the single flickering candle on the chocolate cake, its flame dancing precariously in the draught. The rich aroma of the dark chocolate, usually a source of comfort, now felt cloying, suffocating. Each tick of the clock was a hammer blow against my fragile hope. I had nurtured them, loved them unconditionally, supported their dreams, even when those dreams took them far away from me. Michael in London, chasing his corporate ambitions. Jennifer in Paris, lost in her world of vibrant canvases and bohemian cafes. And Sarah, just a short drive away, building her life with Julian, a life that seemingly had no room for her mother. "They've forgotten again," I whispered, the words heavy with a grief that went beyond a missed birthday. It was a grief for the lost connection, the unspoken chasm that seemed to widen with each passing year. I reached out and touched the delicate porcelain teacup, a gift from Sarah on my 60th birthday, a lifetime ago. It felt cold, lifeless in my hand. The vibrant floral pattern, once a symbol of her love, now seemed to mock me with its cheerful innocence. I pushed the cake away, the sweet scent suddenly nauseating. I couldn't bring myself to eat even a single bite. The thought of celebrating alone, surrounded by the ghosts of birthdays past, was unbearable. I rose from the table, my legs unsteady, and walked to the window, the relentless rain a somber backdrop to my despair. "This has to stop," I said aloud, the words a fragile shield against the wave of loneliness that threatened to engulf me. This wasn't just about a forgotten birthday. It was about a pattern of neglect, a gradual erosion of the bond we once shared. They had taken my love for granted, assuming it would always be there, a constant, unwavering presence in their lives. But even the deepest well can run dry, and mine, I realized with a chilling certainty, was almost empty. A flicker of resolve ignited within me, a small spark in the darkness. I wouldn't beg for their attention, wouldn't plead for their love. I wouldn't allow myself to be treated like an afterthought, a forgotten footnote in their busy lives. I deserved more. I deserved to be cherished, to be valued, to be remembered. And if they couldn't give me that, then I would take matters into my own hands. I returned to the table, the candle now a mere stub, its flickering flame casting long, distorted shadows on the walls. I picked up my phone, the screen still blank, and opened the contacts list. My finger hovered over Sarah's name, a wave of sadness washing over me. I closed my eyes, picturing her radiant smile, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she laughed. I loved her, loved all of them, with a fierceness that defied logic. But love shouldn't be a one-way street. It shouldn't be a burden, a weight carried solely by one heart. Opening my eyes, I scrolled past Sarah's name, past Michael's, past Jennifer's. My finger landed on the name of my lawyer, Mr. Harrison. I pressed the call button. The ringing tone a sharp, decisive sound in the quiet room. It was time to make some changes, to rewrite the narrative of my life. It was time to ensure that they understood the consequences of their neglect. It was time for them to learn a valuable lesson, even if it came at a cost. And maybe, just maybe, this painful lesson would bring them back to me, not out of obligation, but out of genuine love and appreciation. Or maybe not. Either way, I knew I had to do this, for myself, for my own peace of mind. Mr. Harrison answered on the third ring. "Joan, is everything all right?" he asked, his voice tinged with concern. "Yes, Mr. Harrison," I replied, my voice steady, resolute. "Everything is about to change. I need to see you first thing tomorrow morning. It's about my will." Rain lashed against the attic window, a familiar sound in Millbrook. I sat huddled on the floor, surrounded by dusty photo albums, each one a portal to a past life, a life filled with the echoes of children's laughter, the comforting weight of small hands in mine. The air smelled of old paper and forgotten dreams. I traced a finger over a faded photograph of my 3 children, Michael, Sarah, and Jennifer, grinning gap-toothed grins at the camera. We were at the county fair, cotton candy smeared across their cheeks, their eyes alight with pure, unadulterated joy. My heart ached with a dull, persistent throb. How had we arrived here, at this desolate crossroads? Where had the years gone? My fingers lingered on Sarah's face, her bright smile now just a ghostly image in a faded photograph. She was always the sensitive one, clinging to my skirt, her hand always reaching for mine. "Mommy, will you always be here?" she'd ask, her voice small and hesitant. "Always," I'd assure her, smoothing down her unruly curls. And I had been. Through scraped knees and broken hearts, through school plays and graduation ceremonies, through every milestone, every triumph, every heartbreak, I had been there. A single mother after their father left, I poured every ounce of my being into providing for them, into creating a stable, loving home. My own dreams, my own desires, had been carefully tucked away, sacrificed on the altar of motherhood. Working double shifts at the diner, I'd come home exhausted, but the sight of their sleeping faces, their soft breaths filling the quiet house, was enough to erase the weariness. "Worth every penny," I'd whisper to myself, tucking a stray lock of hair behind Jennifer's ear. Birthdays were always special, even when money was tight. I'd somehow managed to conjure a cake, a few small gifts, a celebration that made them feel like royalty, even if just for a day. "You're my treasures," I'd tell them, watching their faces light up as they blew out the candles. My whole world. Their hugs, their enthusiastic "thank you, Mommy," were my greatest reward. I never needed grand gestures, just the simple acknowledgement that I was loved, that I mattered. The rain intensified, drumming a mournful rhythm against the glass. I closed the album, the sound oddly final. It felt like closing a chapter on a life I no longer recognized, a life where birthdays were celebrated, where love was freely given and received. This attic, filled with the ghosts of birthdays past, felt like a fitting metaphor for my current state, forgotten, tucked away, gathering dust. I stood up, my joints protesting, and walked over to the window. The rain had blurred the world outside into a hazy, indistinct landscape, just like my future. Once, I had envisioned a future filled with family gatherings, laughter echoing through a house filled with grandchildren, a future where my children, now grown, would care for me, would remember my birthday, would offer the same unwavering love and support I had given them. That future now seemed like a distant, unattainable dream. I remembered Sarah's wedding, a lavish affair at a vineyard overlooking the valley. Julian, her fiancé, seemed charming, successful. He'll take good care of her, my sister whispered to me, squeezing my hand. You did a good job, Joan. You raised good kids. I had smiled a tight, strained smile, because even then, a small voice whispered in the back of my mind, a nagging doubt that something was amiss. That doubt had solidified into a cold, hard certainty over the past 3 years. 3 birthdays, 3 forgotten dates, 3 years of silence, of empty promises, of excuses that felt like thinly veiled dismissals. Work's been crazy, Mom. Michael had mumbled on the phone last year, his voice distant and distracted. We'll celebrate next weekend, I promise. The promise, like the ones before it, had evaporated into thin air. Jennifer, caught up in her artistic pursuits, had sent a belated text message filled with emojis and apologies. So sorry, Mom. Totally spaced. Love you. The words felt hollow, devoid of any real meaning. And Sarah, the sensitive one, the one who had clung to my skirt, who had promised to always be there for me, hadn't even bothered with an explanation. Julian had sent a bouquet of flowers, a generic arrangement from the local florist, with a card that read, "Happy belated birthday, Mrs. Roberts," and his elegant script. It was a gesture, nothing more, a hollow substitute for a phone call, a visit, a simple acknowledgement of my existence. The rain finally began to subside, the clouds parting to reveal a sliver of the setting sun. The light, weak and watery, cast long shadows across the attic floor. I turned away from the window, a strange calmness settling over me. The pain, the hurt, the disappointment. It was all still there, a dull ache in my chest. But something else had emerged from the ashes of those emotions. A quiet resolve, a steely determination. I wouldn't let them erase me. I wouldn't let them diminish me. I had given them everything, and now I would take something back, not out of spite, not out of revenge, but out of a deep-seated need to reclaim my worth, to remind them, and myself, that I mattered. I walked back to the dusty photo albums, the images of happier times now tinged with a bittersweet sadness. I picked up the one from Sarah's wedding, her radiant smile mocking me from the glossy page. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and made a decision that would change everything, a decision that would in its own way, bring us back together, or perhaps tear us apart forever. The rain had stopped. The air felt heavy, pregnant with the promise of a storm yet to come. Rain lashed against the window pane, blurring the city lights into hazy halos. Another birthday, another year older, another year alone. The single candle on the small chocolate cupcake trembled, its flame mirroring the flicker of disappointment in my heart. This wasn't how I envisioned my 68th birthday, or my 67th, or my 66th, for that matter. 3 years, 3 birthdays, 3 years of silence from my children. I remember the first time, 2 years ago, brushing it off as a simple oversight. Michael, always so busy with his new job, had called a few days later, apologizing profusely. "Mom, I'm so sorry," he'd said, his voice laced with genuine remorse. It completely slipped my mind. Work has been insane. I'd reassured him, told him it was fine, that I understood. But deep down, a small seed of hurt had been planted. Then came last year. Sarah and Julian were planning their wedding, consumed with seating charts and flower arrangements. I understood, truly. Weddings are stressful. "We'll celebrate your birthday next week, Mom. I promise," Sarah had chirped, her voice bubbling with excitement. That celebration never happened. The seed of hurt sprouted a tentative leaf. And now today, my 68th birthday, the silence was deafening. The phone hadn't rung. No cards arrived in the mail. No happy birthday, Mom echoing through the house. Just the rhythmic tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the hall, a stark reminder of time passing, of moments slipping away. I blew out the solitary candle, a wisp of smoke curling into the air, carrying with it the unspoken wish for a different kind of celebration next year. I picked up the untouched cupcake and stared at its frosted swirl. It was a beautiful little thing, but the sweetness felt cloying, a mockery of the joy it was supposed to represent. The rain continued its relentless drumming against the glass, a melancholic soundtrack to my solitude. I wandered through the house, my footsteps echoing in the emptiness. I paused in the doorway of Sarah's old room, now a guest room filled with dusty furniture and forgotten memories. I ran my hand over the faded floral wallpaper, remembering the countless bedtime stories I'd read within these walls, the whispered secrets and shared laughter. Where had those days gone? When had the vibrant tapestry of our family life begun to fray? Downstairs, in the living room, I picked up a framed photograph from the mantelpiece. It was taken a few years ago, on my 65th birthday. We were all there, Michael, Sarah, Jennifer, all smiling, their arms around me. I remembered how happy I'd felt that day, surrounded by my children, feeling loved and appreciated. Now, looking at the photograph, the smiles felt hollow, the embraces staged. Had they ever truly cared, or had I been living in a carefully constructed illusion? The thought stung, a sharp, piercing pain that settled deep in my chest. I placed the photograph back on the mantelpiece, the glass cold against my fingertips. I felt a sudden surge of anger, hot and raw. How dare they? How dare they treat me like this? Like I was some insignificant afterthought. I had dedicated my life to them, poured all my love and energy into raising them. And this was how they repaid me, with indifference, with silence. The anger quickly gave way to a deep, bone-weary sadness. I sank onto the sofa, the cushions sinking beneath my weight. I felt drained, empty, as though all the joy had been sucked out of me. I stared out the window, watching the rain turn into a steady downpour. The city lights were completely obscured now, swallowed by the darkness. I closed my eyes, trying to conjure up happy memories, moments of connection and warmth. But the memories were elusive, fading like old photographs, replaced by the stark reality of my present situation. I was alone, truly alone, and in that moment of utter desolation, something shifted within me. A quiet resolve began to take root, a steely determination that surprised even me. This couldn't continue. I deserved more. I deserved to be valued, to be remembered, to be loved. I stood up, feeling a newfound strength coursing through my veins. The rain had stopped, and a sliver of moon peeked through the clouds, casting a pale, ethereal glow over the room. I walked over to the desk and pulled out a sheet of paper and a pen. I sat down and began to write, the words flowing effortlessly onto the page. It was time to take control. It was time to make a change. It was time for them to understand the consequences of their actions. It was time for a little adjustment to my plans for the future. An adjustment that would ensure I would never spend another birthday alone, forgotten and unappreciated. An adjustment that would, hopefully, make them realize just how much they had taken for granted. The faintest hint of a smile played on my lips. Tomorrow, I would call my lawyer. Rain lashed against the window pane, mirroring the storm raging inside me. Another birthday, another year older, another year forgotten. I stared at the single flickering candle on the chocolate cupcake I'd bought myself. Its tiny flame a pathetic substitute for the warmth of family. My phone lay silent beside the plate, a stark reminder of the calls that hadn't come. I picked it up, the cold glass a shock against my skin. Maybe, just maybe, Michael would remember. He was my eldest, the most responsible one. Surely I scrolled to his name and pressed call. It rang 3 times before he picked up. "Oh, hi, Mom," he said, his voice strained. The background noise was a cacophony of clinking glasses and loud chatter. "We're out with clients. Can I call you back tomorrow?" Tomorrow. The word hung in the air like a lead weight, dragging me down into the depths of my loneliness. "Clients," I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't seem to hear me. "It's as my birthday, Michael," I said, the words catching in my throat. A long pause followed, filled only with the distant murmur of his conversation. Then right. "Happy birthday, Mom. Look, I really have to go. We're in the middle of something important." Before I could respond, he hung up. The dial tone buzzed in my ear, a cruel, mocking sound. I stared at the cupcake, the now extinguished candle a symbol of my extinguished hope. Clients, important clients, more important than their own mother's birthday. I felt a cold, hard knot forming in my stomach. This wasn't just forgetfulness. This was a deliberate disregard, a casual dismissal of my existence. 3 years, 3 birthdays in a row, 3 years of empty promises, of hurried phone calls, of blatant disregard. The first year, I'd chalked it up to busy schedules, the pressures of their adult lives. The second year, I'd felt a pang of disappointment, a subtle sting of hurt. But this year was different. This year, the silence was deafening. This year, the emptiness was a gaping wound. I rose from the table, the uneaten cupcake a reproachful presence. I walked over to the window, the rain still falling, blurring the lights of the city below. I thought of my children, out there in that vibrant, bustling world, living their lives, pursuing their dreams, while I sat here, alone, forgotten. Sarah, planning her wedding with Julian, consumed with the excitement of her new life. Jennifer, lost in her world of art, her canvases more important than family. And Michael, chasing success, climbing the corporate ladder, his clients more valuable than his mother. They had their lives, their loves, their ambitions, and I had nothing. A sudden, fierce anger surged through me, a burning ember in the desolate landscape of my heart. For years, I had poured my life into them, nurturing them, supporting them, loving them unconditionally. I had put their needs before my own, sacrificed my dreams for their happiness. And this was how they repaid me, with indifference, with neglect, with silence. I wiped away the tears that had begun to stream down my face. This wasn't the life I had envisioned for myself. This wasn't the future I had hoped for. I deserved more. I deserved to be loved. I deserved to be remembered. I deserved to be cherished. A new resolve began to solidify within me, a quiet strength replacing the aching emptiness. I wouldn't let them diminish me any longer. I wouldn't let them steal my joy, my dignity, my self-worth. I would take control. I would rewrite the narrative. I would show them what it meant to be forgotten. I would make them understand the consequences of their actions. I walked over to my desk, the mahogany surface gleaming in the dim light. I opened the drawer and pulled out a thick, leather-bound book. My will. It was time to make some changes, to ensure that my legacy would not be one of neglect, but one of empowerment. Time to remind them that actions of consequences. Time to teach them a lesson they wouldn't soon forget. The rain continued to fall outside, but inside, a different kind of storm was brewing, a storm of quiet determination, of unwavering resolve, of carefully planned repercussions. They had forgotten my birthday. They had forgotten me. But soon, very soon, they would remember. They would remember everything. The silence in my own mind was deafening. 3 birthdays, 3 years of nothing. Not a card, not a cold, not even a text from the children I raised, the children I loved more than life itself. How could Sarah, especially, forget? She always seemed so close, so attentive. "Mom, you're the best," she used to say, clinging to my arm as a little girl. Now, the only clinging she seemed to do was to Julian's arm, her fiancé. And Julian, well, he was polite enough, but he certainly hadn't encouraged any familial bonding. My resolve hardened. This couldn't continue. Something had to change. I had to make them understand. I sat at my desk, the smooth mahogany cool beneath my fingertips. The afternoon sun streamed through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, a silent, swirling ballet. It was a beautiful day outside, birds singing, children laughing in the distance. But inside, a chill had settled deep in my bones. I opened the drawer and pulled out the thick, embossed folder. My will. I hadn't looked at it in years, not since my husband, their father, passed. He always handled the finances, the practical matters. "Don't you worry your pretty little head about it, Joan," He'd say, winking, he'd always taken care of everything, always made sure I felt loved, cherished. Now, I had to take care of myself. My hand trembled slightly as I untied the ribbon and opened the document. The words swam before my eyes, legal jargon blurring into meaningless phrases. I flipped through the pages, searching for the section outlining the beneficiaries. There it was, in stark black and white. To my beloved children, Michael, Sarah, and Jennifer, I bequeath the entirety of my estate. I closed my eyes, a single tear tracing a path down my cheek. Beloved children. Did they even remember what that word meant? Did they remember what family meant? I reached for a pen, my hand still shaking. This was it. This was the moment of truth. This was the only way I could think of to make them see, to make them feel the weight of their neglect. I just don't understand, I whispered to the empty room. How could you forget me? The words hung in the air, unanswered. Swallowed by the silence, I took a deep breath, steeling myself. This wouldn't be easy, but it was necessary. It was the only way. I started to write, slowly, deliberately, crossing out the names of my children, one by one. Each stroke of the pen felt like a physical blow, a severing of ties, a final goodbye. With each name I erased, a fresh wave of grief washed over me, but beneath the sadness, a strange sense of calm began to surface. This was right. This was what I needed to do. This was my way of taking back control, of reclaiming my own narrative. I replaced their names with the name of a local animal shelter, a place that had always held a special place in my heart. They, at least, would appreciate the gesture, would put the money to good use. Perhaps they'll remember me, I murmured, a flicker of a smile playing on my lips. Perhaps they'll see this and finally understand. I reread the amended will, the new wording stark against the original text. It was done. The decision was made. A weight lifted from my shoulders, replaced by a quiet sense of purpose. I carefully refolded the document, tied the ribbon, and placed it back in the drawer. The setting sun cast long shadows across the room, painting the walls in hues of orange and purple. I stood at the window, watching the world outside, the world that continued on, oblivious to the turmoil in my heart. The laughter of the children in the distance no longer sounded joyful, but mocking, a cruel reminder of what I had lost, of what I had been forced to give up. But even in the midst of the pain, a new resolve began to take root. I would not be broken. I would not let their neglect define me. I would find a way to move forward, to rebuild my life, to find joy again, even if it meant doing it alone. This house, this life I had built, it was mine, and I would decide what to do with it. They might have forgotten me, but I wouldn't forget myself. I had taken the first step, a difficult, painful step, but a necessary one. And somehow, I knew this was just the beginning. The quiet resolve solidified into something stronger, something almost like anticipation. They wouldn't know, not yet. But they would. Oh, they would. Rain lashed against the window panes, mirroring the turmoil within me. I sat at my antique writing desk, the one my father had given me for my 21st birthday, a lifetime ago. The ink on the revised will was barely dry, the words stark and final against the creamy parchment. I had disinherited my children, my own flesh and blood, Michael, Jennifer, and Sarah. I closed my eyes, picturing their faces. Would they even understand why? Would they care? This is madness. Joan, I muttered to myself, picking up the heavy document and running my fingers over the embossed lettering. A shiver went through me, not entirely of regret, but of finality. It was done. Irrevocable. I placed the will back in its folder, the crisp paper rustling like autumn leaves underfoot. The silence in the house pressed down on me. Usually, at this time of day, Sarah would call, chattering about Julian's latest escapade with the dog, or Jennifer would send a quick text about her newest art project. Not today. Not for 3 birthdays now. 3 birthdays spent alone. 3 years of silence, broken only by the perfunctory happy birthday. Mom text messages that arrived hours after the fact, if at all. 3 years of watching a single candle burn down on a cake meant for sharing. The sweet, cloying scent of vanilla, cruel reminder of celebrations that never were. I remembered Sarah's wedding last year, the lavish affair, the hundreds of guests and me relegated to a corner table, feeling like an afterthought in my own daughter's life. "You look lovely, Mom," she'd said, a fleeting peck on the cheek before she whirled away, engulfed by the music and the swirling crowd. Julian, ever the charmer, had given me a slightly longer hug, whispering, "So glad you could make it, Mrs. Roberts." But his eyes, I noticed, kept darting towards the dance floor, where Sarah was laughing, radiant in her ivory gown. I stood up, walked over to the window, and watched the rain blur the lights of the city below. Had I been a bad mother? Had I somehow failed them? I'd given them everything: love, support, a stable home. I'd nurtured their dreams, celebrated their triumphs, comforted them in their failures. And this was my reward. Forgotten birthdays, empty gestures, a gnawing sense of invisibility in their lives. "No," I said aloud, my voice stronger now, the wavering uncertainty gone. "This isn't about them. It's about me." This was about reclaiming my self-worth, about drawing a line in the sand. They had taken my love for granted, assuming it would always be there, a constant, unwavering presence like the sun in the sky. Perhaps this drastic action, this severing of the financial umbilical cord, would finally make them see, make them realize what they were losing. Not just the money, though I knew that would sting, especially for Michael with his ever-expanding business ventures, but something more profound: the unwavering support, the unconditional love, the quiet presence that had always been there for them, a bedrock in their lives. The phone rang, startling me. I hesitated before picking it up. It was Jennifer. "Mom," she began, her voice hesitant. "Sarah and I were wondering, would you be free for dinner next week? We were thinking of trying that new Italian place you've been wanting to go to." My heart clenched. Was this genuine? Or was it simply a preemptive strike? A way to smooth things over before they came to visit for their usual Christmas bonus. I had always been generous with my children, especially around the holidays. Perhaps they thought this year would be no different. "Dinner," I repeated, my voice neutral. "That sounds lovely, great." Jennifer's voice brightened. "How about Tuesday? Julian can join us too." "Tuesday," I echoed. "Yes, Tuesday would be fine." I paused. "Actually, Jennifer, perhaps we should make it Wednesday instead. I have a prior engagement on Tuesday." "Oh, okay," Jennifer said, a slight edge creeping into her voice. "Wednesday then. We'll see you then, Mom." I hung up the phone, a slow smile spreading across my face. Wednesday? Yes. Wednesday would be perfect. Wednesday was the day I planned to finalize the transfer of a significant portion of my assets, including the house they all coveted, to a charitable organization. A wildlife sanctuary, to be precise. Something I knew would infuriate Michael, who had always had his eye on this property, envisioning grand renovations and extravagant parties. Sarah had been dropping hints about wanting to raise her future children here, close to family. And Jennifer, well, she simply loved the sprawling gardens, the perfect backdrop for her artistic endeavors. The rain had stopped. A sliver of moon peeked through the breaking clouds, casting a pale light on the room. I felt a sense of calm, a deep, abiding peace I hadn't felt in years. This wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about reclaiming my life, about finding my own happiness, independent of their validation. And if, in the process, they learned a valuable lesson about appreciating the people who truly loved them well, that would be a bonus. A birthday present to myself, perhaps. A belated one, but one I suspected I would cherish for years to come. The thought brought another smile to my lips as I locked the will away in the safe, the heavy steel door clicking shut with a satisfying finality. The crisp autumn air filled my lungs as I stepped onto the balcony, clutching a steaming mug of tea. My phone buzzed, a message from my lawyer confirming the final amendments to my will were complete. A wave of something washed over me, not quite sadness, not exactly triumph, perhaps a quiet sense of finality. It had been 6 months since that desolate birthday dinner, 6 months since I'd last spoken to any of my children, 6 months since I'd made the decision that, while undoubtedly painful, felt like the only way to reclaim a sliver of my self-worth. My lawyer, bless his soul, had tried to dissuade me. "Are you certain about this, Joan? It's a rather drastic measure," he'd said, his voice tinged with concern. "I am," I'd replied firmly, my voice unwavering. Now, the deed was done. My children, Michael, Sarah, and Jennifer, were officially disinherited. Another message pinged on my phone. This time, it was from Sarah. "Mom, please call me. We need to talk." A familiar pang of guilt pricked at my heart. Sarah, my sweet, well-meaning, but ultimately thoughtless daughter. I could picture her now, her brow furrowed with worry, her voice trembling on the verge of tears. "Julian and we don't understand." The message continued. "What's going on?" I set my tea down, the warmth of the ceramic mug a stark contrast to the chill that had settled in my bones. Part of me, a large part, wanted to call her back immediately, to explain, to apologize, to reassure her that everything would be all right. But another part, a harder, more resolute part, held me back. They had to understand. They had to feel the weight of their neglect, the sting of their indifference. "I'll call you later, Sarah," I typed back, my fingers hovering over the send button for a moment before finally pressing it. The silence that followed was deafening. The only sound was the rustling of leaves in the wind, a melancholy symphony that mirrored the turmoil within me. I closed my eyes, letting the crisp air wash over me. I pictured their faces, their shocked expressions when Mr. Henderson, my lawyer, would inevitably inform them of the changes to my will. Michael, ambitious and driven, always so focused on his career that he barely registered the world around him. Jennifer, the free spirit, flitting from one artistic endeavor to the next, her head always in the clouds. And Sarah, caught in the whirlwind of wedding planning with Julian, her entire world revolving around seating charts and floral arrangements. A week crawled by, each day a slow drip of silence. I busied myself with gardening, with reading, with anything to distract myself from the gnawing emptiness that had taken root within me. Then, one evening, the doorbell rang. It was Mr. Henderson. "Joan," he said, his voice grave, "I've just come from meeting with your children." I gestured for him to come in, my heart pounding in my chest. "They're distraught," he continued, settling onto the sofa. "They had no idea. They genuinely didn't realize the extent of their neglect." He pulled a stack of envelopes from his briefcase. "They each wrote you a letter," he said, handing them to me. I took them, my fingers trembling slightly. I recognized Michael's neat, precise handwriting, Jennifer's flamboyant scrawl, and Sarah's delicate cursive. "They asked me to give these to you personally," Mr. Henderson added. "They wanted me to tell you how sorry they are." I thanked him, my voice barely above a whisper, and he left. I sat there for a long time, the unopened letters clutched in my hands, the weight of them surprisingly heavy. Finally, I took a deep breath and opened Sarah's letter first. Her words, penned in a shaky hand, spilled across the page, a torrent of apologies, regrets, and promises to do better. "Mom," she wrote, "Julian and I have been so caught up in planning the wedding, we lost sight of what truly matters. We took you for granted. We're so sorry." As I read, a single tear rolled down my cheek. I opened Michael's letter next, then Jennifer's. Each one echoed the same sentiment, the same heartfelt remorse. They spoke of missed phone calls, forgotten birthdays, overlooked gestures of love. They acknowledged their selfishness, their blindness to my pain. They pleaded for forgiveness, and in that moment, as I sat there reading their words, I knew I had to tell them. I had to tell them the truth. I reached for my phone, my hands still trembling slightly. I dialed Sarah's number. "Sarah," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "There's something I need to tell you, Mom," she answered, her voice hesitant. "I've booked a villa in Tuscany," I said, a small smile playing on my lips. "For all of us, for Christmas. Consider it an early wedding present and a belated birthday gift to myself." There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then Sarah's voice, choked with tears of joy, filled my ear. "Mom, oh Mom, that's wonderful. We'll be there. We promise. We love you." The villa, a sprawling estate nestled amidst rolling hills and vineyards, was a gift to myself, a symbol of my newfound independence. It wasn't about the money. It was about reclaiming my life, about reminding myself that I deserved joy, that I deserved to be cherished. And as I stood there on the balcony, the Tuscan sun warming my face, I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my soul, that this Christmas would be different. This Christmas, we would be a family again. Christmas morning arrived, crisp and bright. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" I asked, turning to Sarah. She nodded, her eyes red-rimmed, but a small smile played on her lips. We were alone in the house. The silence, once heavy with unspoken accusations, now felt lighter, almost expectant. It had been a difficult few months since the reading of the will. My children, shocked and hurt, had finally understood the depth of my pain. They hadn't forgotten my birthday intentionally. They'd claimed, just overlooked it in the busyness of their own lives, an explanation that, while not entirely excusing their actions, at least offered a glimmer of understanding. I never realized how much it hurt you, Mom, Sarah said softly, breaking the silence. Her voice was thick with emotion. We were so caught up in our own things, we didn't see she trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. I reached out and took her hand, squeezing it gently. I know, sweetheart, I replied, and I forgive you. The truth was, I had forgiven them long ago. The will, the dramatic reveal. It wasn't about revenge. It was a wake-up call, a desperate attempt to bridge the growing chasm between us. And in a strange, painful way, it had worked. Julian called earlier, Sarah said, her voice regaining some of its usual brightness. He and his family are coming over later. They want to apologize. I smiled. Julian, bless his heart, had been the most affected by the whole situation. He adored Sarah, and the thought of causing a rift between her and me had been devastating for him. That's lovely, dear, I said. We'll make a proper Christmas dinner. The thought of having my family around me, truly present, filled me with warmth. It wouldn't be the Christmases of the past, with overflowing gifts and boisterous laughter. This Christmas would be quieter, more introspective, but also more meaningful. We had stripped away the layers of expectation and obligation, revealing the raw, vulnerable core of our relationships. Later that afternoon, the house was filled with the murmur of voices and the clatter of dishes. Michael and Jennifer arrived with their families, their faces a mixture of apprehension and hope. They embraced me, their hugs tighter, longer than usual. We sat around the table, the aroma of roast turkey filling the air. Julian, seated next to Sarah, cleared his throat. Mrs. Roberts, he began, his face earnest. I want to apologize for everything. We should have been more attentive, more considerate. We took you for granted, and that was wrong. His words echoed the sentiments expressed by my other children earlier. They had all learned a valuable lesson, a lesson about the fragility of family bonds and the importance of cherishing the moments we have together. It's all right, Julian, I said, smiling. We're all learning, aren't we? The conversation flowed easily, the earlier tension replaced by a newfound sense of connection. We talked about the past, acknowledging the hurt and misunderstandings, but also focusing on the future, on rebuilding and strengthening our relationships. As the evening drew to a close, Michael stood up, holding a small, beautifully wrapped box. Mom, he said, his voice thick with emotion. This is for you. We know it's not much, but we wanted to get you something special. He handed me the box, and I opened it carefully. Inside was a delicate silver locket, engraved with the word Mom. Tears welled up in my eyes. This wasn't about the gift itself. It was about the thought, the effort, the genuine desire to make amends. It's beautiful, I whispered, clutching the locket to my chest. Thank you. I looked round the table at my children, their spouses, my grandchildren, the will, the disinheritance. It had all been a charade, a carefully constructed play to bring us back together. And now, looking at their faces, filled with love and remorse, I knew it had worked. I had gambled, and I had won, not just materially, but emotionally. I had regained my family, not through force or manipulation, but through the power of vulnerability and forgiveness. The house, which had felt so empty just a few months ago, was now filled with the warmth of family. The silence, once a symbol of our estrangement, was now filled with the gentle hum of love and reconciliation. I had given them a scare, yes, but I had also given them something far more valuable, a second chance, a chance to appreciate the woman who had loved them unconditionally, even when they had forgotten to show her how much she meant to them. The Christmas lights twinkled on the tree, reflecting in their eyes, and in that moment, I knew that everything would be all right. We were a family again, and that was the greatest gift of all.